Hey, I want to take 2 minutes of your time and have a discussion about saw blades. There's a couple big deals out there with saw blades. One of those big deals is know what size and speed your saw blade is, i.e. if you have a 14-inch saw, make sure you have a 14-inch blade, and then make sure it's rated for the proper speed, right? That you're not running a 3,000 RPM blade in a 6,000 RPM saw. These are important things to remember. The other, and it seems like it's silly or funny, but when you meet people and you find their saws and then you play with them and their saw blades come apart, you have a harder time believing that just everybody knows this off the top of their head. So we're gonna review some stuff. One, right here, right? This direction, right? That has to go this way. What happens when it goes this way? This is what happens. And that's coming at you, the operator, right? If the saw blades cover isn't covering that section, it's gonna come at you. So for your own safety, please make sure, one, that your arbor is the correct size, right? There's two different sizes, and a lot of these will have an arbor piece that pops out if it takes a larger arbor and stays in if it's a smaller arbor. Please check and make sure it's going the right direction. That is one of my number one things to share with you guys, because this happened at one of our training events and it was very frightening, and luckily no one was hurt. Oh, it wasn't my saw, because I know there's someone out there thinking it was my saw. Two, this was at another training event. I was handed the saw with this blade on it. This came off a working truck, and they said, okay, we'll use this saw. And I looked at that blade and said, is that blade an abrasive blade? And their answer was yes. And I don't know if you can see this, but there's not a whole lot of abrasive on there. Now my question is, how do you know after an unknown period of time that your saw blade is still functional? It's still good for a rescue, right? Because the person you're rescuing is hoping you're coming there with a brand new blade or one that performs like that, right? And that's what we owe our citizens. So both of these blades have been used. Now, how would I know how fast these blades cut? Because when I first put these blades into my saw, I did a test run. So what I mean by a test run is I need you to choose some form of stock. I don't care what it is. It can be a 2x2 piece of tubing that's an 1/8-inch thick wall thickness, right? Whatever the tube or stock is, when you first get your blade, you're going to put it in your saw and you're going to fire that saw up, let it warm up, and then you're gonna, with a video camera, time how long it takes your brand new blade to go through that stock. Once you've done that, now you know the actual run time based on that stock of how long this blade goes through. Now the question to you is, let's say this blade, I believe this blade going through a piece of 2x2, 120 wall tubing, square tubing, went through it in about 43 seconds. So what is now an acceptable parameter for how long it can take in 2 months if you've used it at 6 drills? Is it double that time? Is it triple? Does time matter? Because I know in the rescue it matters, right? To make sure the blades work so that we can go do the job. So here's the deal. A lot of times what we hear is, well, until it's worn out, we're not going to replace it. My question is, how do you know when an abrasive blade is worn out? And I will argue that any time an abrasive blade is doubled its time, that means if this blade took 43 seconds to go through my 2x2, then at the point that this blade now takes 1 minute and 26 seconds to go through the same amount of material, that blade should be out of service. Now, you will still probably see abrasive on it, but we both know that because of the fact that its cut time has doubled, it is no longer effective in the way it once was. And I encourage you everywhere to consider, how are you testing your blades? How do you know that they're in service? Because when I walk up to a truck company and they hand me this, and I realize there's almost no abrasive on it, which means this is probably 10 times the original cut time if it'll cut through it, that's a problem. The last thing I'd like to do today is discuss abrasive blades. Now, abrasive blades are still being used in the fire service and I imagine in law enforcement, but the abrasive blades were are an old technology, right? They're no longer used in a lot of industry. Honestly, most of us are using some type of diamond encrusted blade like this. So if you think back when all we had was a composite blade like this, one of the reasons saws went from 12 to 14 inches is because you just wanted more blades, so you didn't run out of blade in an evolution. Because you know, as you start cutting, especially if you're not cutting well, this blade size will shrink as we work it, right? So think about the fact that I used to come in there with a 12-inch blade, but maybe I got close to it being too close to the end of my cut, and so I was running out of blade. So we go to a 14-inch blade. So now a 14-inch blade means a 14-inch saw, which means more weight, right? Heavier, harder to operate above our heads. So my argument is that today we use a lot of 14-inch blades or 14-inch saws. Why? Why aren't we using 12-inch saws? Why are we back to using 14-inch saws? Because if the argument with the 12-inch saw was I lost too much of my blade, i.e. it got too small, today's blades, being made of diamond impregnated steel blades, they don't shrink in diameter. So if you're taking good care of your blades, you're taking good care of your saw, a 12-inch saw will do far more work than a 14-inch saw with an abrasive blade. So just a thought to ponder as to why are you using a 14-inch saw when maybe you could use a 12-inch saw. Again, depends on your operational area, what you have to cut through. If you're using these also for rescue, I understand the argument for a 14-inch or bigger saw blade. But if your operation on a truck company is typical residential and commercial forcible entry, I would argue a 12-inch outboarded blade is the #1 blade to be used, obviously as a composite blade. So I want you to get out there and cut something today, go out there and breach some doors, and I want you to remember this stuff. And remember, you're out there to make the rescue, and they're counting on you, so time counts, right? So go out and do your best.